And welcome back. Now on Tuesday, the 17th of September, Chorlton Central Church will be holding a public meeting to talk about how we can stop the far right. And there's the whole load of issues around that. And we have, I'm very pleased to say, the spokesperson to stand up to racism here. That's Nahella Ashraf. So I welcome you this morning. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, and thanks for having me.
A pleasure. So tell us a little bit, first of all, about what Stand Up to Racism is, if you will.
So Stand Up to Racism has been around for a number of years now. We're a national organisation, but we have groups across every city and town of the country. And really, we were set up because we recognise, yes, we need to campaign against the far-right thugs on the streets, and you will have seen that recently. And that's really important, but also to recognise that it's not just the extreme far-right that we need to be campaigning against. It's also more of the kind of racism you get, particularly from politicians. Mm-hmm. The more kind of acceptable racism, whether it's coming from government policy or from the media or just general politicians making comments and really encouraging, I guess, racism within our society through their actions.
Now, because of the shortness of time, I'm going to cut to chase and just ask you, why should our listeners, for example, why should we be concerned, and how can we get involved with Stand Up to Racism?
Well, you will have seen the riots. And I want to actually start by saying I didn't classify them as riots. As far as I'm concerned, they were pogroms, because you saw people trying to burn down hotels where they thought refugees were residing in there. They wanted to burn down mosques. They even talked about burning down mosques when people were inside it. So you get an idea of just how dangerous the situation is. And then you look across the whole of Europe and you can see the far right growing. We've just had the elections in Germany and you've seen the far right taking positions there. And you could, it means that if we allow this to happen in Britain, every Muslim, every black person, anyone who is seen as slightly different will be a target for these people. And to be honest, like many of your listeners, I don't want to live in a society where as a Muslim woman or as a black woman, I don't feel safe walking down the road.
And I mean, you have been a spokesperson for this organisation for so long. From what I recall, you've been so active. Are there many other, for example, Muslim hijabis who work alongside you, or is it still very much yourself?
I think it's really important to say there's a whole number of people that are part of Stand Up to Racism. And to be honest, in Manchester, we have a WhatsApp group which has almost 1,000 people on there.
Wonderful.
And many of those people on that WhatsApp group are Muslims. So I think it's really important for us to recognise that. And particularly Muslim women, they really have been on the sharp end of the racism that we are getting in society, whether it's the comments around us being, traditionally submissive, or about the fact that we're oppressed because we wear our hijabs. But we are being on the cutting edge of receiving that racism. But I think it's also important to say that we're also on the cutting edge of fighting back. So many of the local groups, we in Manchester, we have a Greater Manchester WhatsApp group, but we also have local Stand Up to Racism groups. And that's fantastic. We've got groups in Disbury, we've got groups in Salford, we've got the one in Chorlton that are having their meeting. Many of these groups have Muslim women at the heart of it or are leading that, and I think that's fantastic, because rather than being victims, we are standing up and fighting back.
We're joined by Nahella Ashraf, who's talking as a spokesperson for Stand Up to Racism, and I do want to ask this niggling question, because obviously we had the elections recently. How involved are the local parties with Stand Up to Racism?
Well, in the past, we've always had a huge amount of support from the Labour Party, but more individuals, because we have to be very clear as well. We've seen it actually. The Labour Party are now in government, and some of their rhetoric is really not helpful. Yvonne Cooper, our latest Home Secretary, you would hope would be better than the previous Tory Home Secretaries, and in some senses they probably are. But it didn't stop her from her response to the riots. The pogrom was to say that we're going to deport 14,000 refugees.
Right.
That's not helpful. In fact, what they're doing is they're pandering to the right and to the racists, because they think they're going to get votes from these people. What they should have said, and would have been more helpful and more honest, if they said, actually, refugees are not to blame for the cost of living crisis. Refugees or Muslims are not responsible for the fact that you can't afford to pay your mortgage, or that you're worrying about your heating bills, or that you're worrying about, getting on the housing ladder. All of these issues are a direct result of government policy,
Right.
not refugees or Muslims. And they should have said that. And I think it's shocking that they didn't. But I'm not surprised as politicians. It's very easy for them to blame others, isn't it?
I mean, they're not here to reply to that, and I wish they were. But let's have a look then about how we personally as individuals can actually support Stand Up to Racism.
Okay, so I think it's worth saying that as individuals, it's very difficult to feel like you can change things. But by coming together, whether it's by coming to your local groups, or whether it's coming and being part of the Greater Manchester WhatsApp group and the activist group, you can feel empowered. And you can make a difference. And actually we saw that around what happened in Manchester when the far right tried to march. We came out in mass numbers, individuals or families and friends and groups of people came out. But really, by coming out even as individuals and joining other individuals, we were far bigger and far stronger. And therefore we were able to push the far right back. Think about what happened at the situation at the airport with the Muslim family who were attacked by the police. The police immediately said, the police have no case to answer. We had a demonstration immediately outside Andy Burnham's office and said to Andy Burnham, in fact, we demanded that this needs to be treated seriously, and actually at no point is it acceptable for a police officer to stamp on someone's head or kick somebody in the face when they're lying down with their arms down as well. There is no context in which that is acceptable. Now, since we had that campaign, 2 police officers are being criminally investigated for their actions that day. So again, it's another example of when we come together, we can shift things. We can't wait for other people to do it, but together we are strong, and we prove that, whether it's through the far right riots or whether it's standing up to police brutality.
Okay, so let's fast forward, because you raise the key issues that we have all been affected by: the marches recently, the protests, the violence, the aggression, which is very frightening for anybody, whether you're an adult or a minor. So how can we benefit from our meeting that you've organised that's coming up? What do we expect to hear?
So I think the meeting that we're having in Charlton is really about bringing people together. And you don't have to live in Charlton to come to it. If you're anywhere around the area or even further afield but you want to know more, come along to that meeting. Now, the speakers at that meeting will represent different organisations or sections of the community that feel attacked, who have had experience. So we're going to have people from the refugee community, we're going to have Muslims speaking, we're going to have people from the Jewish community speaking. We're also going to have people like trade union activists who are going to talk about what they've done. You know, local activists that can talk about what they've done to make a difference. And it's going to give an opportunity for people to come along to hear more about what we're doing and some of the issues and the importance of why we need to be involved, but also to hear about what they can do. And they can meet people locally. And so they're not feeling like they're on their own, because a lot of times people are watching what's happening on the TV or hearing it amongst their friends, chatting about how terrible the situation is, but they don't necessarily know how they can get involved. And that's why I think having a meeting locally in Charlton is so important, because it's accessible to everybody. And it's really important to say that it's open to everybody. You don't have to have a previous experience about being an anti-racist campaigner. You just have to care to come along and get involved.
Okay, so just to conclude, unfortunately the shortness of time won't allow us to elaborate more, but I hope you can come back and we can talk more. The details about the event and where it's being held, please.
So it's in Charlton at the church on the 17th, it's a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. But I do also want to say, I know evening meetings aren't necessarily easy for everybody to get to, but we're also going to be having a social on a Sunday afternoon. Again, it's about bringing in people that can't necessarily get to things in the evening, or they have commitments or family. This is a Sunday afternoon, so it's the 15th of September, and it's going to be taking place at the Hume Community Centre. And again, it's a garden centre. It's, if you want to bring your kids and bring your inner prams, you can do that. Everyone's going to come along, share some food, meet the activists, learn more about what you can do. So these are 2 big events coming up, and I just want to put that out there, because it's really to say to your listeners, if you've not got involved previously, or you've heard about us but you're not really sure about what you can do, come along to both of these events if you can, but if not, come to either.